These are assembly instructions for my clay pigeon gift box. When you're taking your cardstock off your mat, when I remove this piece, the centers of 3 letters are missing because they're still on the mat. You won't need the letters, but keep the center for the R, the O, and the B. I'm removing the rest of the letters and disposing of them, but for the R, O, and B, I'm going to keep the interior of those letters. And I just have a piece of masking tape. And in order to keep them safe, I'm going to adhere them to the underside of my masking tape and save them for when I need them. And I have 2 sets of them. I have 4 solid circular pieces, and 2 of them are slightly bigger than the 2 others. I'm just measuring them up against one another. These 2 are slightly smaller than these 2. So these 2 are for the lid, and I'm putting them aside for now because we're going to work on the bottom of the box first. So next I have these 4 pieces with these little tabs on one side of them. So I have taller ones and then I have shorter ones. I'm putting the shorter ones aside. They're also for the lid. So we're going to be using these 2 for the bottom. And then I have some plain strips. I'm using the wider ones for the bottom and putting aside the narrower ones for the lid. I'm starting with my pieces with those little tiny tabs, and I'm folding on the score lines to create those tabs. And then I'm laying my piece down on my craft mat, and I'm taking my bone folder and I'm running it along the score line just to smooth out those points between my tabs. I've got another score line at the base of this tab. I'm not folding down on that one, so I'm just taking my second piece that looks exactly the same and I'm folding down on the tabs for it as well, and then smoothing out the edge. I'm holding my piece so that I can see that score line, and I'm putting glue from the score line to the edge on that tab. And then I'm taking my second piece, and I have the small tabs on the right hand side for both pieces, and I'm lining up the cut edge of my second piece right on the tab. I'm going to place that on my craft mat, and I'm using the line on my craft mat to make sure that my piece is nice and straight. Then I'm putting glue from the score line to the end on the second tab, and I'm bringing around the end and gluing it in place, which closes up my circular shape. I'm placing my shape down on my mat, and I want those little tabs all pointing towards the center of my shape. I'm taking one of my solid circles, I'm putting glue all over the perimeter on the underside of my circular piece, and then I'm lowering my piece with the glue downwards into my shape. I want the edge of my circle to be right along the edge of the walls of my shape. So I'm just going in with my bone folder and I'm spreading that glue that's around the perimeter. Then I'm going to flip my piece over. I have my second circle. I'm just covering the underside of it with glue and placing it on the bottom of my box. I want the edges of my circular shape to be around the edges of my box. So I'm putting that circle down on my mat and just spreading that glue. So next I have 2 narrow strips. I'm putting glue on the underside of them. I'm just lowering them into my shape. I'm gluing them to the inside of the walls of my shape. There should be a little tiny border at the top, and I'm just gluing it down as straight as possible. I'm placing these pieces so that this join is about halfway on the strip that I'm gluing in. All right, so now I'm going to move on to the lid. My lid starts off the exact same way as the bottom. So I'm creating my circular shape. So I'm just putting glue on the underside of the strips, and instead of placing them on the interior of the box, I'm going to place them on the outside. And there should be a little border at the top and the bottom. I purposely left off the top of my box because I want to decorate it before I adhere it to the lid. So these are the pieces to decorate the top of my box. I'm going to start with the ones that have the writing cut out of them. I'm putting glue on the underside of one of them, and I'm matching it up with the second one. I'm trying to place the cutouts for the letters exactly on top of one another. And then I'm putting glue on the underside of them, and I'm gluing them down to my solid circle, and I want the edges to meet up nicely. So now I have the centers of those letters that I had put aside. So I'm gluing both layers together, and then I'm gluing them down to the center of my letter. And then I have the 2 inner pieces for the letter B. So I'm gluing both layers together, both pieces all at once. And then I'm positioning them on my B. And then I have the piece for my R. Next, I have all these circular parts. I have 3 large ones with cutouts on the outside perimeter of them. And then I have 3 smaller ones with cutouts on the perimeter of the shape. And then I have 2 that have cutouts that come from the interior with a solid ring. So I'm going to start with the one that has a solid ring. I'm going to take one of the shapes. It kind of looks like there's a sun cut out of the center. And I'm putting glue between the cutouts. So not on the outer edge, but just between the cutouts. And I'm doing that all the way around. And then I'm taking my ring piece and I am positioning it so the inside of my ring piece is following along the inside of my piece that has all those cutouts. I want both pieces even on the inside. And then I'm taking my second piece. I'm putting glue all over the underside of it. I'm gluing it on the top, positioning the cutouts of it just over the cutouts of the previous ring. So those 2 pieces are even on the exterior and the interior, and those cutouts are placed exactly on top of one another, or as much as possible. And then I have some very sharp scissors. So I'm looking at the underside of my piece and I'm just cutting around the outer edge of that ring piece, so that first piece that I glued down. Cutting as neatly as I possibly can. So next I'm taking my mid-side circles. I'm just putting glue on the underside of them and I'm stacking them up so that the cutouts on the perimeter are exactly on top of one another. And I'm doing that for all 3 layers. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing with the largest sized circles. So I have my 3 different sizes. I'm going to put glue on the mid-size one and I'm gluing it down. The inner circle of the larger one and of the smaller one are exactly even, and I want the cutouts to be nice and even as well. And then I'm going to glue the smaller one on top. And then I'm gluing this whole thing down into the center of my circle that has the text in the middle. And now I'm putting glue on the underside of that. And I have the lid for my box. I'm just placing my piece on the top of the lid. I want the edges to be nice and even. And I am just going in there and I'm spreading that glue as much as I can. The gift card fits inside with plenty of room for extra little treats. So that's my clay pigeon.